Welcome to a cover story conversation with Rajeev Chandrashekar, BJP MP and also a member of the Standing Committee on Finance. Welcome to cover story, Rajeev.
Thank you, Priya.
Well, we've heard the budget. We're all trying to digest the budget. So I'm going to begin with the Chidambaram challenge. You know, he has said that I ask any ardent BJP supporter, which I'm sitting with one, to find one big idea in the budget.
Look, I think Mr. Chidambaram's approach towards budgets and economics, the country has experienced and suffered. And as he left in 2014, he left behind a broken economy.
He was dream budget.
Yeah,
and,
so therefore, that's the point I'm making. I think there was a school of economists led by Mr. Chidambaram that believed in a lot of rhetoric and a lot of big bang and a lot of big ideas that went into the budget, but left really mayhem and destruction in the wake of the budget. The difference in the way Prime Minister Modi has looked at budgets is a stark contrast from this hyperbole-driven economics of Mr. Chidambaram.
But the markets didn't fall after Chidambaram's budget.
And it's bounced back up yesterday again. So
with some strong arm tactics and some rethinking.
No, so let me say this. The budget today is not about political hyperbole. The budget is now today, after 6 years of Prime Minister Modi, a statement of the state of the economy of the day. Before that, during that, and after that, there is decisive governance action, there is decisive policy action that continues, will be there before the budget, there will be there during the budget, and will be there after the budget. So there's a sharp difference between the governance strategies of Chidambaram and Manmohan Singh, which all revolved around this extreme rhetoric around one day in a budget, and then doing nothing before that or after that. This is a very different approach to governance. This is about working 24/7, really working hard at decisive policy action, and having a budget that in a sense gives you a snapshot of where the country is, where the global economic scenario is, and therefore signals a path forward for the government's sequenced policy action. So there is a difference between Chidambaram's approach to budget and Prime Minister Modi's approach to budget. There is absolutely no doubt on that. And the results are exactly there for people to see.
And first show was a flop. Let's see. You were saying this is a longer innings.
I have long since abandoned getting into this tutu meme with Mr. Chidambaram. Mr. Chidambaram is increasingly sounding like a man bitter because he's outside the system, he's been marginalized, and history will be very harsh on him as a finance minister and him as a politician. So him and his views on whether it's a flop or not a flop is really very immaterial. The issue is how do investors see it, how do citizens see it, and that is a test, in my opinion, that the budget has to pass.
Okay, so let's look at how you talked about the context of the times. Currently, I mean, even you would agree that the economy is in a bad shape. You've seen the last few quarters, you've seen the...
Of course.
So given that, the need of the hour, we all were saying that this should be what we say a do and die budget. Okay, Modi doesn't do or die, but at least he should give some path that sends some reassurance.
Look, I think, Priya, we must understand a few things here. That growth has moderated over the last 2 to 3 quarters. There is no doubt that the government accepted that. But the reasons for that have to be understood before you start discussing and debating the solution set. The reasons for that have been, one, clearly a global economic environment that is turned bearish.
You guys blame it on the Congress.
No, let me finish. Number one. Number two, there are clearly issues that have arisen after the cleanup of the last 5 years in the economy. It has affected the banking sector. There are problems with the NBFC sector that has come out of a consequence of cleaning up the mess that has been left by the UPA and rebuilding the economy. And I can argue that with facts and data. So those issues, for example, the NBFCs, the ILFS scam, the DHFL scam, have caused issues in the credit markets that in turn have caused issues relating to loans available to corporates that have in turn related to consumer credit. Those are issues that this budget squarely addresses. So therefore, if you look at it from a point of view of addressing the causality of the last 3 quarters, this budget slowly and surely, systematically addresses that. Number one. Number two, like the Prime Minister said yesterday as well, we cannot do budgeting and we cannot get fiscally profligate in the absence of a clear understanding of the dark clouds that are gathering globally. There is a China factor, there is a Middle East factor, there is a US election coming up. So there are all of these three things that can create potential downsides to our economy if we are not careful. So prudency and being careful and making measured decisions in the budget is really what is expected and required of a responsible government, and that is exactly what the government has done, which is we've moved in the right direction. Investment is up in the public sector, but we have in a sense resisted the temptation to get very profligate and spend too much or do something high risk given the external environment.
Okay, see, I'm not an economics person, but from what I understand, the need of the hour was to encourage spending. Now, just you saying banks, I don't see banks lending to corporates very much after the budget. Has anything been done on that? This confused income tax structure rate, is that encouraging spending? I mean, where is...
No, look, I think in my opinion, and I say this, I know this is not an economic discussion, but I still want to make this point, that the macroeconomic stability and strength of this country has been never stronger today than any time in the last 10 years. And I say this as a fact. And I challenge anybody, including Mr. Chidambaram and Dr. Manmohan Singh, to dispute that. Number one, the financial sector, especially the public sector banks, that were burdened by and collapsing under the weight of the NPAs and corruption, has never been stronger today. Let me finish. The calculation of the finance minister clearly is that given that the banks are better capitalized today, can go to the public markets to raise money, and the managements of the banks have been told not to be fearful of prudent lending decisions, that corporate credit will slowly, there will be an uptick on that. It will slowly grow up, because in the last few years, there is a concern, as all of us have acknowledged, that public sector bankers have become risk averse. They have become fearful of lending, thinking कि हम CBI में पकड़ जाएंगे, CVSE में. तो ये, now the finance minister and the prime minister have exhaustively spoken to them and have told them that they're amending sections, that things cannot go into an investigation unless there is a threshold of evidence, and that there will be no punishment for prudent lending decisions. I expect the public sector banks to start lending again, and corporate credit will grow and consumer credit will grow. This is our expectation. Now, we will sit here again in 2021 March and we can discuss whether those assumptions were right or wrong. But the fact that the budget is built around these assumptions is a fact that everybody should know.
Okay, see, again, another sector I like to talk about is jobs. Again, I'm quoting Chidambaram because, I do think he's made a very good commentary on the budget. He says that the three sectors that could encourage jobs are manufacturing, construction and mining.
Right.
I would add automobiles, real estate comes in construction. Right. Nothing has been done for that. You're saying we gave money to real estate earlier. But
Priya, I think here is the point. I think Mr. Chidambaram has a fixation of thinking that the budget in itself is everything. But this government has explained and through its conduct shown that there are many things it has done before the budget. It has got a corporate tax cut. It has got incentives for
corporate tax cut has not achieved very much. Your finance minister admitted yesterday at CI herself, okay, we've done this, now you guys do something.
The stimulus for the manufacturing sector, that to grow the manufacturing sector as a priority, is a statement made by the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister repeatedly. There are a series of things that the government has done by way of policy action before the budget. There is a series of things that the government has done in the budget. For example, subordinate debt for MSMEs. It has talked about tax incentives for new manufacturing units. Then it has talked about corporate credit and public sector banks. Now, please understand that these are a sequence of policy actions. There will be more that the government will do. But to expect that the budget is the only thing that the government does, which is what Mr. Chidambaram's way of managing economy was, which is that on those 2 days, you milk publicity, and then after the second day, you do exactly what you were doing before the budget was announced. That is not how this government functions. There is a series of things that the government has done in the pipeline, then there is a budget, and there's a series of things that will go again in the policy pipeline. The government has repeatedly said to get to $5 trillion, manufacturing segment of the economy has to grow significantly. In my estimate, the manufacturing segment has to grow by almost $1 additional trillion more. So that is understood by the government, and there is a clear set of things that the government is doing, will continue to do, and has done to kickstart manufacturing and expand manufacturing. For
See,
example,
I don't have.
for example, there's a specific provision for textile. The government understands and recognizes the opportunity today because of the US-China trade war for the textile industry. And they have reduced import duties on a certain raw material that was for 20 years the demand of the textile industry. They have created a National Textile Commission. So there is clearly many things that the government is doing. But again, I say, the risk of offending you and your fondness for Mr. Chidambaram, Mr. Chidambaram's approach to the economy has been proved to be flawed. It failed. And therefore, for him to benchmark this government's actions and conduct and governance strategy with his is just exposing himself to more ridicule and criticism.
Okay, let's leave Mr. Chidambaram out of this. Let's talk about Nirmala Sitharaman. What has she done under her thing? We've seen the lowest growth in 11 years. Whatever incentives, last budget was disastrous. After that, there was some rollback, some correction. But nothing has really come out of those corrections, as she herself has admitted to the industry.
I think we
so what hope do we have of a proper economic leadership?
I think the economy is the responsibility of the government of India. The finance minister, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, I believe, is a very hard-working finance minister who came into this job, not in the best of circumstances. We had
Narasimha Rao came in at the worst circumstances, Manmohan Singh, and they delivered such a good budget. So that's not a good argument.
No, it is an argument. I mean, whether you like, if it's a good or bad, I don't know. It is the correct argument. That she came in when the global economic environment was tough. She came in at the time when the consequences of cleaning up the economy, especially in the NBFC sector, were manifesting itself with holes in the credit market and risk aversion in the public sector banks. So she came in at a time where things were difficult. But she has, in my opinion, worked very hard to engage a large number of stakeholders and understand the real issues, as opposed to just restricting herself to some few bureaucrats and only listening to their interpretation of what is wrong. She has put herself
from all the meetings that the PM is having with industrialists.
She has asked openly for ideas from outside. She has sought inputs and comments from everybody, including people in parliament and outside. She has heard everybody. I think she is a finance minister today who, she may not be Mr. Chidambaram's skill sets in oratory or whatever it is that Mr. Chidambaram is.
She tried very hard. She quoted his favorite poet also.
No, so I think she has worked hard. I believe that the economy has turned a corner, as the GST collection has shown, that we are at 1.15 lakh crores. The indirect taxation, which shows that consumption is on the verge of again going back and picking up. So she believes today the economy has, in a sense, bottomed out, and everything that has been put into place in the budget and pre and post the budget is about boosting investments. And the fact that she has created a budget where public expenditure, bulk of which is capital expenditure, is as a percentage of GDP, she's maintaining the same levels and if not more, shows that she understands how important investment is to our economy.
So where is, all the big idea that is that let's disinvest, go in for disinvestment. That seems to be the best way of raising money. Or why not encourage people to spend and bring back liquidity?
I think, Priya, we must understand that in the last 3 quarters, as the economy slowed, one of the first things consumers do in any economy like ours is that if they sense that some things are slowing down, they retreat from spending into saving. Now, consumption will pick up the moment the economy and investments pick up, because consumption has a lot to do with the feel-good factor, and the consumption has a lot to do with the consumer confidence in the economy. As corporate investments pick up, as credit starts opening up, and as the signs and the implications of the public expenditure on infrastructure spending goes up and jobs get created in the wake of it, I think consumption will also pick up. As it is, you can see from the last month's collection numbers, January numbers, that GST has now again gone back to the 1.15 lakh crore levels. So that points to consumption. In specific sectors like housing and automobiles, which are linked to consumer finance, the retreat of NBFCs, the liquidity crisis facing NBFCs, has affected that. There's no doubt. In the budget, the finance minister has said that she is going to create a special liquidity window to refinance NBFCs. So the NBFCs come back into the game of housing finance and automobile finance. We expect that also to pick up, because a large part of consumption of automobiles and housing is through consumer finance. It is not, people don't write checks from their savings account. They have to borrow money and then buy a house, borrow money and buy a car or a motorcycle. So that has in the last 2 quarters been affected because of ILFS and because of DHFL. That will get sorted out as the finance ministry picks up, puts into place the liquidity for NBFCs.
Okay, we're going to take a short break because economics is not just about numbers but also about politics. So I'm going to come back and talk a bit about the politics of the economy just after a short break.
Battle for the national capital.
देखना चुनाव खत्म होते ही शाहीन बाग का मुद्दा भूल जाएंगे।
कहा था बंगला नहीं लूंगा, गाड़ी नहीं लूंगा।
The biggest faces.
नियत साफ थी इसलिए बरकत हो गई। आम लोगों के लिए इसमें कुछ नहीं है।
बता रहा हूँ कि हम रुकने वाले नहीं हैं।
The newsmakers.
टैक्स का समस्या हल की।
लोगों का अपमान करने का अर्थ आप समझते हैं?
पार्टी समय समय पे सबको जिम्मेदारी देती है।
Weeks of intense campaigning.
प्रधानमंत्री को देशद्रोही कहा।
दिल्ली का मैसेज पूरे देश में जाता है। कौन सच बोल रहा है, कौन झूठ बोल रहा है?
Who's winning Delhi? 8 February, 6 a.m. onwards on NewsX and NewsX YouTube.
MDH किचन किंग मसाले को किंग क्यों कहते हैं? अगर MDH का किचन किंग किचन में हो तो हम सब कुछ बना सकते हैं। बैंगन का भरता, आलू गोभी, भिंडी मसाला, मिक्स वेजिटेबल, मटर पनीर और भी बहुत कुछ। ये तो मैजिक है।
बहुत बढ़िया।
लाइक मैजिक।
MDH।
टीवी OLX कर दिया, अच्छे पैसों के लिए नहीं। ये तुम लोग जो रोज रोज एक्सीडेंट करते थे ना, इसलिए अब ठीक से होगा काम जब ध्यान ना होगा टीवी पे। चल,
जब ध्यान होगा टीवी पे तो ठीक से होगा अपना काम।
वाह सर, क्या डील ली है? OLX डॉक्टर से पहले फाइनेंस पढ़े थे क्या?
OLX पे खरीदने के ढेर सारे ऑप्शंस, बेचने के ढेर सारे ऑफर्स, तभी तो तेरी भी हैप्पी, मेरी भी हैप्पी। OLX, डाउनलोड द ऐप।
MDH का किचन किंग किचन में हो तो हम सब कुछ बना सकते हैं। MDH किचन किंग मसाला। लाइक मैजिक।
बढ़िया। MDH।
We all have the power to do good, to work hard and find solutions to the challenges we face. In that same spirit, Hitachi has been powering a better world for over 100 years, integrating digital technology with social infrastructure to solve today's complex issues for a brighter future. Hitachi Social Innovation is powering good.
बढ़िया है, क्यों ना?
प्राकृतिक हल्दी, मिर्ची, धनिया।
नहीं, मिर्ची, धनिया, हल्दी। MDH।
Hello and welcome back to Cover Story. We are in conversation with Rajeev Chandrashekar. Rajeev, before the break we tried to decode the budget, but you know, given the context that to invite investment, there's also a social environment has to be correct, it has to be right, this has to be conducive. We've seen a whole lot of unrest happening. Secondly, economics is also about perception and leadership. That it seems that this government is not focusing too much on the economy. They are saying, economy chodo, nationalism, Hindutva will win us the votes. That is the perception that I'm coming from.
No, I mean, I think it's an interpretation that you can make, but I don't think that is the case. I think everybody today who's in politics, I mean, I am not such a senior leader in politics and I get it. So I think it is a bit facetious to believe that the Prime Minister of the country and the Finance Minister of the country don't know or understand how critical the economy is, because that affects every man, woman and child today, their livelihoods, their standard of living, their aspirations. And we have maintained again and again, this is a country where increasingly millions and crores of people have increasing aspirations, and that is the mandate of the BJP. That is the brief on which we have won the elections. So therefore, in my opinion, economy remains central. Jobs, making people prosperous regardless of who they are, where they are from in this country, that remains single point our main agenda as a government and as a party. Number one. Number two, this issue of social environment. Look, I think there is no argument and nobody will argue that there is clearly some some design to create unrest, whether it is artificial, whether it's contrived, whether it's political, we can leave that outside this interview for the moment. But it is almost like there are people who are interested in and invested in this objective of creating a narrative that all things are not well in India, and therefore the rise of India from 1.9 trillion in 2014 to 2.9 today should somehow be put a brake on.
No, see, I'll tell you, people invested in, maybe if you're saying, okay, let's buy argument, people want to sell this narrative. Why is the government playing into their hands with this narrative? Why bring in the CA at a time when you know the economy is in the doldrums? You need to do something drastic. Let's put the focus on jobs and the economy instead of bringing in another thing that causes social unrest.
I don't understand this question at all.
Why?
It is almost like saying the government should not do anything but one thing at a time.
No, but do something that is not provocative. Where is the urgency for CEA at this point?
Look,
there is urgency for the economy.
One of the things that we must understand about Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the government is that just because you get provoked doing the right thing, we will not stop. This being provoked by something that is absolutely fair, uncontroversial, and doing the right thing, if that provokes somebody, then that is unfortunately the consequence.
It's not a little corner of Delhi being provoked. We've seen agitations all over the country.
That's what I'm saying. The agitations are based on either deliberate misinformation and lies, and it is clear now that there is absolutely nothing in the CA that any right-thinking man, woman or child can oppose. When you are giving citizenship to people fleeing certain death and persecution in 3 Islamic countries and giving them citizenship of India, why would any Indian have any cause to oppose that? It is clearly politically motivated to create a narrative that the government is in some sense discriminating against one community when it has done nothing of the sort. Prime Minister Modi in the Ram Leela Maidan made an extremely exceptional point, that every rupee that the government of India has spent in his programs, whether it is the free cylinder, whether it is education, whether it is Awas Yojana for homes, there has been not 1 inch of discrimination or exclusion of any community, religion, faith of India, of any Indian citizen.
Then why mention a particular community when you're talking about CA?
But Priya,
and the second thing is
we are going back to the same. I don't understand this question at all. When a bill is about Sri Lankan Tamils, it will say Sri Lankan Tamils. If amnesty is for Ugandan Indians, they will say Ugandan Indians. How can you not mention it?
So clearly
if you say it is non-Muslim minorities in the 3 Islamic countries, how can you not mention who they are? You have to mention who they are.
But why provoke? Anyway, that's another story. I want to come back to the budget. See, everybody admits, I hope you also, that there has been a slowdown, right? But the budget, there is not mentioned the word slowdown at all. Is the dog that did not bark? Has she even addressed the issue? Shouldn't she be at least opening up and admitting it? It doesn't seem like a very honest budget.
I think, again, I'm sorry to disagree with you. I'm sorry to disagree with you. That the government has not acknowledged the slowdown is to basically say that you have not been following what the government has done for the last 5 months. The government has announced a corporate tax cut, which is for the first time since independent India that we have announced a corporate tax cut and
tax levels. Corporates are not enthused to invest as the government has admitted
but you are asking a question about government acknowledging a slowdown. Government's policy actions, including corporate tax cuts, incentives for new manufacturing units, the new scheme for realty companies, the liquidity window for NBFCs, and now in the budget, the MSME support, all of these are an acknowledgement that there is a slowdown and therefore we need to do things for those who are having a productive capacity to improve the economy and are suffering some hurdles. There is a series of policy actions.
When Rahul Bajaj gets up and says something, he is, shushed up. Where is the...
Look, I think this is all now. I don't want to move from the realm of a budget to imaginary conflicts and conspiracy theories.
But there is a feeling of lack of trust.
Look, I think the finance minister has accepted that. Even though I don't accept that, the finance minister has squarely head-on taken on this issue of trust and said, look, we respect taxpayers. We will even go to the extent of legislating a taxpayer charter, putting it in law that taxpayers cannot be harassed and cannot be hounded, and that they have a legitimate right, set of rights, just as the government has a right to revenue. So we have gone the extra mile. The finance minister has gone the extra mile and talked about trust, talked about We want ethical entrepreneurship. We want good entrepreneurs. And as a matter of fact, both the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister made it a point to say that the edifice of our economy, as is mentioned in the economic survey, is about entrepreneurship and private capital.
Why you ignore the whole economic survey? That is the other thing. It talks about economic reform. It talks about a whole lot of things that it looks like Nirmala Sitharaman is one thing and the economic survey is another thing.
One of the clear points that comes out is that you hold this government to a different standard. Economic survey is by a chief economic advisor, and this is the case for the last many years. When Raghuram Rajan was the chief economic advisor, the economic advisor gives you a blue skies view of what are the opportunities and threats and challenges to the economy, and that is a document that is used by the political executive, the finance minister and the prime minister, to take ideas out of that and put some of them in the budget.
Has any idea been taken out of it?
No, please understand, it is not just for the budget. Those are ideas of the chief economic advisor that will then find its place in various policy actions. The chief economic advisor has said expand the financial sector. In the budget, the finance minister says we have banks that will now tap the capital markets to expand their balance sheets. The finance minister says LIC will now go and raise more money from the capital market. Those are all part of what the chief economic advisor has said, that the banking and credit markets have to expand.
How hopeful of you of the disinvestment program? It hasn't achieved the target of the last year. It was much less ambitious.
No, I am very excited by and enthused by the government's decision to list LIC. And I'll tell you why. LIC today is India's biggest financial entity, but it remains a closed company. By listing it, it becomes open. It will be managed and governed in terms of like any other transparent corporate entity. It will have access to money from the capital markets, and it has a potential to become a really significant global financial giant. From the current closed company, which is opaque, nobody knows what it does, how it does it, what kind of investments it makes, to listing it where the whole country and indeed the citizens and the financial investors from the world will understand what kind of company it is, what kind of investments it makes, what kind of strength it has and what kind of capability it can build going forward. So I think it is a big thing. It is almost like the Saudi Arabians listing Aramco. It is like taking India's flagship company and listing it for the world to see the strengths of that company, which is exactly what the Saudi Arabians have done with Aramco, their crown jewel oil company. But
so it's not selling the family silver.
It is not selling the family. It is listing it. It is listing it. It is not selling it to anybody. It is listing it so that we all can see what a good company it is. But I believe that it is a process that will take a full 1 year, and it's not an easy process. And I hope the government is really focused on making sure that it gets done over the next 1 year.
Okay, last question. What are the 4-5 sectors that you think are going to benefit from this budget?
No, I think infra is going to definitely benefit. My own view that consumer categories will start showing pickup in the coming months and years. And I think based on the NBFCs, the better NBFCs, the good NBFCs, the small private banks, because the deposit insurance has gone up, they will all do very well. And I think banking sector is an area, in my opinion, given the government's commitment to expanding the banking sector and creating a world-class financial sector to fund the $5 trillion economy. I think that is also one place I think there will be considerable economic activity.
Okay, well, that's it. Thank you so much for helping us decode the budget.
Thank you, Priya.
And that's it from us this week. Thank you for watching this show. We'll see you again, same time next week.